Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Sanchez. Just by a way of introduction, I get the have the honor of representing the furthest north area, Kingwood, surrounded by San Jacinto and Lake Houston, and the furthest south, Clear Lake, surrounded by Galveston Bay, Clear Lake, et cetera. So my question is, and I'll use some of the terms you used in your presentation, you guys have been working on this for 2 years, and you've had a variety of white papers out there, and I think your comment was, this was precisely that hurricane. So 2 weeks in advance, we knew exactly what this hurricane was going to do. And for the first time, the meteorologists nailed it. They got it correct. So my question is, the river authorities, in particular San Jacinto River Authority and Coastal Water Authorities, do they work with you in preparation for this potential of event that y'all been working for 2 years on?
We've had limited interaction with the
Say that again?
We've had limited interaction from my perspective, from what I know of, with the San Jacinto River Authority. There's a lot, I think, to be learned from this event in terms of how that communication works. Our job, I will tell you, sort of, our job is not political, but we take one lesson from politics that we apply to how we do business.
Everything we do is political.
And that is, it's a game of addition. The more partners we can bring to the table, the better off we're going to be. When you look at the folks we work for, they're somebody that has anything to offer an emergency response. The more people at the table, the more partners at the table, the better. If there's an opportunity for that interaction to be there, we're certainly willing to sort of engage in that. We're looking at sort of how that runs, and we really need to take a regional approach to how those plans work.
So I'm on limited time. So the entity, San Jacinto River Authority, that had control of the water release that ended up flooding about 4,000 homes in the Kingwood area for the first time in the history of the neighborhood since we were developed back in the 60s and 70s, has limited participation in your emergency disaster drills that you do on occasion, which, my opinion, is a great example of how you follow protocol. How does a model work? What do you do when this particular event happens? So the San Jacinto River Authority did not participate in any of these discussions in preparation for, as you call it, precisely this hurricane.
I'm not aware of any. I don't know if they've coordinated with the flood control district or not, but in terms of, I know they were not an emergency operator.
Were they just stupid? Were they just lazy? Or exactly why wouldn't they participate in the disaster drill that you guys have been doing for 2 years, which helped us on many fronts?
That you'd have to ask the
Well, I'm trying to, but they're hiding behind lawyers. But I think it's sheer stupidity on their part, and I hope they hear this. So one of the things that I did notice from Harris County Flood Control is that the Corps of Engineers was doing a study for $10,000. Is there any way that we could get the Corps of Engineers, and I will say right now, I will put up the $10,000 personally, to do a study of procedures, protocols, because what's important to us is looking in the forward mirror, not the back. We can revisit on what happened and why did it happen, but more importantly, allow me 30 seconds to finish, what's important for the 63% of the businesses that we lost in this area, what's important for probably about 25% of the homes that we lost in this area, for us to ask them to rebuild and to come back in the neighborhood, we need to understand that this event can never happen again. So I would love to get your help, if you would be kind enough, to enlist the Corps of Engineers to do a very similar study into the procedures and protocols of the San Jacinto River Authority, who blatantly flushed us without any warning, without any notice, and they said that they didn't have to give notice because that's not what they do. I have Judge Emmett's phone number in my cell phone. I could have called him instantly. So I'll get back in queue. I have a couple more follow-up questions, but appreciate what you guys did and how you do it, and thanks for being here today.
No problem. We're glad to make an introduction and put you in touch with the right folks.
Please do. I don't know the appropriate people, but you do, and I could use some help.
We're glad to facilitate that discussion, as well as how flood control worked out that with the Army Corps. And I will tell you from our perspective, and one of the things that consistent is not a motto, but a way of doing business on our side is, don't do what you have the right to do what's right.
Amen.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Councilmember Martin.
And thanks again, Mr. Sanchez. And my apologies for a laser focus on this initiative, but it's very important for the residents and the businesses that I'm trying to convince to move back into the neighborhood and to regenerate, which was a great neighborhood and still is today. So it's critically important for us to get a lot of these responses. And it sounds like you guys did an unbelievably good job of exactly what you called precisely that hurricane, doing simulation studies, doing disaster drills, and preparing for precisely that hurricane. And as a gentleman much smarter than I once said, failing to prepare is preparing to fail. So I find it interesting as I've been going through a war of words with the legal folks from the San Jacinto River Authority who's hiding behind legal tactics and will not come to a meeting and will not honor my request. But when we talk about some things about your preparation, on their website and their response said, San Jacinto River Authority and county emergency officials meet regularly to prepare for storm events and to discuss ways to improve their collective performance in accomplishing their respective responsibilities. And it also goes on to say, when I asked about emergency response and giving us notice, it says the San Jacinto River Authority has no ability to order or control evacuations or to serve as the emergency responder for people in harm's way who may live or travel within the floodplain, which in my opinion is only a phone call away to you or to Judge Emmett. So once again, they're saying on their website that they, let me quote it, meet regularly to prepare for storm events. And they meet regularly to discuss ways to improve their performance. When was the last time you saw someone from the San Jacinto River Authority?
I personally have not met anybody with the San
You
Jacinto
have
River
never
Authority.
met anyone. And you're in charge of, give me your title again?
Liaison to the Director and Public Information Officer.
So you're in every briefing that they have about emergency response, is that correct?
Generally, sir, yes.
So everything that revolves around emergency response in the county and surrounding areas, you're involved in,
Yes, sir.
correct?
Yes, sir.
And for someone to say that they meet regularly to prepare for storm events, that's a bald-faced lie. You don't have to answer that. That's a rhetorical question. But there are things within this document that they're CYAing and they're lying to people, because if they would have prepared for this, they would have done the simulation models, they would have understand the data that you guys did, and they could have been able to do something like pre-releasing the water from Lake Conroe into Lake Houston and coordinating with the Coastal Water Authority to then release the water from Lake Houston into the Gulf of Mexico 2 weeks before this hurricane came near us, because it did exactly what the meteorologists told us to do. And when it became a named storm, we should have opened up the floodgates, start moving water from one body of water into another into the Gulf of Mexico, and we would have saved lives and we would have saved property. And my response to that is, for someone to state in a public document that they did all these things is a bald-faced lie. So thank you.
Thank you, Council.